welcome to the Kolbe Cast, episode 307. Thank you for joining us. Today, Bonnie and I are joined by Kolbe teachers Olivia Knuffke and Carl Hasler to discuss music and music theory. We begin with a discussion of the importance of music and its place in a classical education, and follow with an account of music from the perspective of Plato. We also discuss the role of the church in understanding music and the role of music in the life of a Christian. We discuss how the understanding of music theory helps to open our minds to the beauty that we hear in music and the classes and resources that Kolbe offers to help students come to this understanding. Be prepared for a litany of musical puns as you join us in this conversation. We hope that you'll enjoy the show.
Hi there, I'm Bonnie, Kolbe homeschooling mom of 4 lads and lasses, liturgical musician, popcorn, and podcast fanatic.
And this is Stephen, homeschooling father of 5 and director of development for Kolbe Academy.
Hi, Stephen. How's it going?
It's going well. I think I've finally kicked the illness that I was struggling with, so I think. And it's also kind of spring here in Arkansas, so I think it's good because I probably have to mow my lawn for the first time this weekend, which is always an event.
Just the first time.
My
first gosh. I'm on about 3 or 4.
Carl's got you beat there. That's noteworthy. And that will be the first of many musical puns. So just settle in for them because we are returning to a conversation about music that began a while ago, in which at the time I called a multi-movement work given its musical nature. We took a rather long intermission though, and see, I got lots of these. We'll just keep on going with them. But we are tuned up and ready to take some musical topics up today, once again with Olivia Knuffke and Carl Hasler, both of whom teach for Kolbe and are musicians themselves. Welcome back, y'all. It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks, Bonnie.
We've been talking about this for a while. Stephen and I were like, let's talk about music again with Carl and Olivia. Okay, we should get them back to talk about, well, today's the day. We've got him back now. So we started these conversations in episode 186 and then second movement, as it were, episode 201. And so we need to catch up a little bit. So Olivia, we're going to start with you. How have you been and what are you up to?
I am doing very well. We are entering spring here in Dallas area. Actually, Carl and I are as much neighbors as you can be in the virtual learning world because he's in Dallas and I'm in Irving. So we're actually not that far apart from each other. But we're doing well. I'm still teaching privately cello for my own studio and then teaching music history and music theory for Kolbe, which has been a real wonderful journey. And then one thing that I'm very proud of recently is the newly named St. Cecilia Music Club at Kolbe has really taken off under some new student leadership. Ignatius Carl got it off the ground last year, and we're really grateful to him. And then when he graduated, he passed it on to 2 wonderful students who have really worked hard. And I'm technically the moderator, so I just show up and I open the room for them. And otherwise than that, I can claim no credit because they do it all themselves. But it's really taken off. You know, they'll have performances, they'll deep dive into composers on the club meetings, and it's just growing at a really rapid rate. So I think was a lot of desire for it there for a long time, and now that it's been offered, students are flocking to it. So anyway, that's been really fun to watch this last year, is the club taking off.
How neat. Would not be surprised if a great many of the Kolbe students are musicians, study at least one instrument. You guys would know that better than I would. What has your experience been?
Yeah, some definitely really, really wonderful players, and then just people who love music. And one reason we renamed it from the Classical Music Club to the St. Cecilia Music Club was in order for people who might, be more jazz centered or other genres could feel like they could find a voice in the club as well. And so we've had all kinds of instrumentalists and covering different genres and time periods. There's a plethora of really talented students out there, and students that are also just super interested in the subject matter.
Very cool. Remember you guys mentioning that when we were talking before. It's neat to see how it's grown. And Ignatius has been on the Kolbe Cast. We will link his episodes so folks can get to know him. Carl, how about you? What have you been up to? It's been a little while.
Well, my first question is not the Gregory the Great Club, but okay. All right. I've just been doing my thing, teaching everything that they throw at me: Roman history, U.S. and modern history, uh, literature 11, what era of Christendom, U.S. modern literature. Oh yes, and I teach philosophy, sort of, kind of. I do that, and you know, chasing after my grandkids and who are able to outrun me now, and you know, just doing my thing as best I can.
Very good. Well, it's good to see you guys. I've been telling pretty much everyone that here recently I have taken up my uh, college piano repertoire. I was a piano major in college. And it's interesting to me what I'm drawn to play and how some of the theory is kind of coming to mind as I play through it. And that's been a real helpful thing to me, trying to pick it back up again because it has been such a long time. So that was sort of one of the inspirations for this conversation. So I wanted to zoom out a little bit and kind of we are going to cover some ground we did in previous conversations and go from there. Let's start with broadly music as one of the liberal arts. Maybe an overview of that.
Well, part of the reason it's there, it's because it's the theory, I think as we get into it, it will be related to arithmetic. So just like you have astronomy, which is the extension in the physical world of geometry, you have music that is the extension of arithmetic. So looking at proportions and relationships between the different notes and things. So it's kind of, I think from like a trivium, a liberal arts standpoint, that's kind of, as we're flowing from kind of our thoughts to the grammar, rhetoric, and logic, being able to speak well, to think, and then to move on to arithmetic, geometry, which is usually happening at the same time, actually, but then, and then apply those to not just quantity, as it were, but to kind of bring that to the real world so we can actually experience that in a way, whether it's astronomy or music. So that's my take on why it's one of the liberal arts, I guess.
Yeah.
I wouldn't disagree with anything that Stephen said, but my sense of the quadrivium is that these are the four arts of quantity pertaining to matter. Okay. And so you have two aspects of that. You have the discrete quantity or number, and you have the continuous quantity or extension. And so under the first category, you get arithmetic, the theory of numbers, and you get music, as the application of the theory of number. And, the first time I came across that idea, it sort of dawned on me, yeah, music is math. Now, I wouldn't have thought that when I was a performer, such as I was a performer, mind you. To me, it was just hearing the notes. But when you start to do theory, it's mathematics. And of course, on the other side of that, you have geometry, which is the theory of space. And of course, there is the whole point of music is to fill up space. And then you have astronomy, which is the application of the theory of space. So again, music can be in some ways understood in terms of how to measure it in that space. So that's sort of my take on the quadrivium. And I got that in my notes, mind you. I'm not remembering this all off the top of my head or anything. I have it written down. But I was always struck by, I think it was Miles Davis who said something about art, painting is a visual thing, music is an auditory thing, something like that. Music fills up space, things like that. And that makes sense to me.
Sure. Yeah.
So I was thinking, the whole point of the quadrivium and the trivium is to help, and also I'm referring to my notes, so I wouldn't speak this well off the top of my head, but is, to be able to understand the natural world, right? And then could communicate and understand effectively. And I think that one thing that you realize as you do study music in regards to the other liberal arts is how much you do really need to have an understanding of music in order to have an understanding of the natural world. And that we all do come in contact with music in some way or another versus it being like an elective art form, if that makes sense. So, and I think that's one thing that I try to, kind of get through to my students um, in both the music history and the music theory classes that this is necessary knowledge, especially the music theory class, whether you have a huge amount of interest in music or very little interest in music. Um, but it is necessary in order to go forward into the world with like a thorough understanding of the rational world around you and to kind of be able to have that grasp of even a basic level of music is hugely helpful. And I think that it transforms the way that you look at the natural world, even on a more basic sense.
Hmm.
I don't have anything in my notes here, so this is just, this is just spontaneous. But when we're talking about music and then astronomy as well, it seems like there's a secondary factor that comes just in pursuing knowledge or the world. It's wonder and beauty, that's built right in there. So it's a connection. As you were talking, there's a connection between the intellect and the marvels of the world there, that it's making the beautiful comprehensible, I guess, is what I want to say, which is important for learning. If there's not that sort of interest or intrigue, then the mind kind of goes dull and isn't able to learn, I guess. The student's not able to learn.
Oh, very good. As I mentioned with the repertoire that I have picked up again, one of the things I'm appreciating most about the things, and I'm just kind of playing around. I'm just not. It's almost embarrassing to say how inconsistent I am about just sitting down to play this, because it is more of a sort of a fun thing for me to kind of. Anyway, all that aside, the order of the selections that I have gravitated to most in my whole set of collection, because I'll have repertoire from the various periods of classical music. So the things I'm gravitating to now are Haydn and Beethoven, things like that. Those were not my strong suits at the time that I was learning them the first pass, and I think it has a lot to do with the order of those. There's something about the order that's inherent in the structure of those particular that era and the pieces that I'm working on, that it's really the thing for me right at this moment. So I think there's something there.
Yeah, definitely. That's what you start to uncover when I just remember when I first started taking music theory in, middle and high school, and we started to analyze some of the pieces that I might have heard a lot over the years, and kind of started to put a reason behind why, like, oh, why do we gravitate toward these pieces? And then you start to see the chordal progressions, and you start to see the melodies and the harmonies that are working together and that they mathematically make sense. And you're like, oh, well, this is more than just a like or a dislike. There's a method to the madness here, right? And so definitely with someone like Bach, he's the king of that. So you can just go through and clearly see that he had a plan here. Because I used to, I still feel this way, but how do they come up with these amazing pieces? And well, they really knew their music theory. Let's just say that. So they knew, what works, what sounds pleasing to the ear, and where to add those moments of dissonance and those moments of consonance, and just all that relationship between the math behind what they were doing is what gravitates us to maybe, like the Beethoven pieces you're playing or the Haydn pieces you're playing.
Yeah. The symmetry of them too. I don't think I really appreciated that as much as I do now. So, for whatever that's worth. Carl, looked like you had something. Were you going to add on to that too?
Well, I was just thinking how interesting it is that things that we listened to when we were younger may not have done much for us, but as we get older, as we learn more, as we develop our intellects, all of a sudden you'll hear a piece and it clicks for you. You understand it. Now, I can't say that I understand pieces of music because I understand its chordal arrangement or some of the interior structure that theory would make me learn, but it's got to be that I'm understanding something about that theory that I now can come to appreciate that I didn't appreciate when I was younger.
Yeah.
So it's as if you get the math problem that you've been struggling with for weeks, and all of a sudden it comes to you. It comes to you. And I found that interesting in what you were saying about looking at things that you once played, but now, oh, I understand them now that I didn't understand earlier. I think there's a reason for that in certain ways that doesn't immediately sound like we're talking about music, but I'll get to that here in a minute. I got an idea. You had asked me, and maybe because I opened up my big mouth and said something about Plato, that, oh, come talk about Plato and music. Okay, here we go. All right. I don't know if there's anywhere in the literature before Plato where they really talk about music, maybe in Homer, the Muses, things like that. But the topic of music comes up in Plato's Republic in the discussion of the education of the guardians, the rulers who will be the most virtuous men who will govern this ideal city that Socrates ultimately says is never going to come to pass. But be that as it may. So it's first mentioned when trying to talk about the decent man. And I always ask my students, well, what's a decent man? Okay, never mind that. But the idea here is, who should we imitate? Because that's one of the ways in which we learn. We learn by imitation. Children imitate their parents, etc. We as students imitate those professors that we think are really cool. It's all our life we're trying to figure out who to imitate. Well, as Catholic Christians, we want to imitate Jesus, Christ. And we do oftentimes a very poor job of it, but be that as it may, that's the good man, the decent man. So music comes in this discussion. Well, why is that? Well, it's because music is essentially composed of three elements, Socrates says: words, harmonic mode, and rhythm. Okay, words. Well, that's speech. And he'll go on to say that harmonic mode and rhythm follow words, not the other way around. So that means speech is musicae, music. All speech is music. So when I would teach this in my classes, I would ask my students, you ever had a class where it just didn't work? It wasn't that the professor didn't know what he was talking about. It just didn't work. You were bored out of your skull, or you had one of my classes. It just didn't work for you. And then you had those classes, especially those classes in that subject matter that you hated, and all of a sudden, wham, it worked. You got it. All of a sudden, it turned out to be your favorite class. And I would say, that's because the music of the professor registered with you. You heard it in a way that you didn't hear it before. So Socrates talks about music in terms of what is said, but also importantly, how it is said. And so we would go through experiments in class about how you say, I love you. I love you. I love you. You know, do those different things, and the students will learn, oh, well, it matters how you say things. This is where harmonic modes come into play, the modes of music. And Olivia may correct me on this because my theory is old. I don't remember very well. But the Greeks understood there were 6 modes, really. The Ionian mode, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian. Oh, there was a 7th mode. They called it the syntonal Lydian. I think we call it the Locrian now. Well, okay, that sounds great. Nobody knows what that means. So I would explain it to my classes like this. Imagine you're sitting down at a piano keyboard and you didn't have black keys, you just had the white keys, or you just played the white keys. So if you could figure out where middle C is, and you played C to C, you're playing in C major, the Ionian mode. And so start with D up to D, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Aeolian. And the students would look at me and go, so? And then I'd say, well, tell me what's different. And there'd usually be 1 or 2 kids in the class who knew something about music and go, well, the half steps are different. And I said, yes, that's right. And what happens is it creates an aural pattern. If you just play in Dorian, if you're in the key of C and you play in Dorian mode all the time, it's creating an aural pattern. And so Socrates says, okay, there are certain modes which are good for mourning music, the kind of music at funerals and stuff. And he called that the Mixolydian and the syntonal Lydian, which I guess would be a kind of mix of the Lydian and the Mixolydian. But then there are Ionian modes. There are some Ionian modes and Lydian modes which are called relax modes. And the Dorian and Phrygian, well, maybe those are okay, maybe they're not. But what he's wanting in this republic is that sort of marching music, military style music. And so I would talk to my kids in class and I go, have you ever put music on in the car that makes you want to get real aggressive and drive fast? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Or you put on something slow and it's kind of romantic, And so the argument in the Republic is, of course, we only want those modes which will make our guardians courageous and brave, and yet have empathy, be somewhat tenderhearted to the people. All those other modes, nah, we don't want those. We'll cast those out to the side. So the Greeks understood how music, one, is a matter of speech and can affect how you have discourse with others, but also how music sort of seeps into your being. And so the Guardians, of course, talk about building the watchtower for their republic in music. We have to guard against certain kinds of music which will convey behaviors and attitudes which are not good for our citizens, and music that will build patriotism or courage or whatever. And then I jump forward to the late 1950s. Why did people get all upset about rock and roll? Oh, it changed those kids. They started rebelling. Well, yeah, music can have that impact, that effect on us. It can change our behaviors. And we've gone downhill ever since. But that's sort of the philosophical underpinnings, I think, of a way of thinking about music, whatever age we find ourselves in. whatever age we find ourselves in. And so I think what happens is that somehow early on, because we know that education up to the age of 6 or 7 is the most important time of a child's life. And Socrates says at some point, that's when we sort of find our basis for our entire being. So I think there's something to the idea that what music we gravitate towards early on, or what we're taught early on, is the kind of music that will follow all the rest of our lives. And some people get a very narrow taste of music in their lives. And I guess I was fortunate. I got a very broad taste. So, I don't know how refined my taste is, but there's lots of different genres that I find interesting, challenging. I listen to a lot, from jazz, classical, world music, rock and roll, whatever. So that's my take, given what I've read in Plato's Republic, and how I can kind of extrapolate that out now that Olivia is going to improve upon this and tell us really how music is.
Absolutely not. I was taking notes over here, Carl. So,
Oh,
I needed a refresher course. It's been many years since I read Plato's Republic, so I needed that. No, and I was actually thinking, because in our music history class, we don't go as far back as Plato. We start really at the turn of medieval to Baroque, Renaissance. We start in the Renaissance, really. And I was thinking about how one of the predominant musical philosophies in the Baroque era was something called the doctrine of affections, and our students learn about this. And it was this idea that you do not want multiple emotions in one piece of music, because it's going to throw you all out of whack. And we need this purity to our music. If it's a melancholy song, that's fine, but you got to stay melancholy. You can't then have some key change and it becomes some bright and sunny piece. And this is obviously years and years after Plato's Republic, but that idea of music and its effect on our souls and on our minds was still very much a predominant idea in the musical world. Enter the classical era, that starts to simmer down. Enter the romantic era, the more emotions, the better. Let's throw you all over the place. Let's give you a mental breakdown. We don't care. We're just gonna, we're gonna throw everything at you. You're gonna not even know which way is up by the end of this piece. And I ask my students a lot, what do you think of the doctrine of affections? Do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it? And I get a lot of nuanced answers, because some say, well, one issue that they see in the modern world, in our current world with music, is not acknowledging enough how much music does affect us. But at the same time, these amazing pieces and songs came out when we did kind of throw the doctrine of affections out the window, and we let our creativity come to the surface, and just wherever the muses were taking us, we went. So you can argue both sides for sure, but I think it's interesting that idea that Carl was highlighting in Plato's Republic was very much there for a long time. It really stayed. It stayed with, really the kind of ethics behind music. And then at some point, it really, as we know, and as we see now, that's definitely not something that most people would consider when composing a piece of music, whether that be a country song or a contemporary classical piece, whatever it is. But I think it's interesting to see that how it continued and then slowly died out as time went on.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I think about the modes quite a lot, and we see them still show up in church music, antiphons and other settings. Maybe we can use that to shift into the contributions of the church has made to musical notation and theory. And is there a good starting point for that?
Well, one thing, I can't really speak to some of that, but one thing that comes to my mind if Plato's right that harmonic mode and rhythm follow words, then church music, by its very nature, is prayerful music. It's about prayer. That's what church music, my understanding is what it's supposed to be. It's about prayer. We sing the Psalms. That's prayer. And despite some of the contemporary church music writers who perhaps should find something else to do with their lives, good church music is really good, thoughtful, sound, theologically prayerful music. So we should sing in church instead of most of the people that stand around me quietly, I guess because they can't believe I'm singing. But there you go.
Glad you're singing. Everyone knows I'm parish music director, so I hesitate to even wade into the whole church music. That's like that's a tricky topic to discuss. Anyhow, I do once again I find it very interesting. The contributions the church makes to music, even the notation itself, that we have notated music.
Well, that's another interesting point. It is thanks to the monks of the 7th century, who are the first to sort of chart out how music's supposed to go. We don't really know what Greek music sounded like. We know the modes they used, but we don't know how they instrumented those things really. Oh, they had a lyre. They probably had drums. They probably had other kinds of pipes or whatever, but we don't know how they constructed their music. The church has taught us how to begin to construct music.
Mm-hmm.
So that, I think, is interesting and remarkable in itself. And I find that very fascinating. I remember as a kid hearing Gregorian chant. It wasn't like you could turn on the radio and hear it, or you didn't hear it in church very often, or I didn't. And I remember the first time I got a Gregorian chant record, and I wore it out. Because I'd sit back with my headphones on and just listen. And what was the term we used? Spaced out. I spaced out, listening to that album, and thinking, wish I knew Latin, but still, it wasn't so much what the words were, it was the tonality of things, and what rhythm there was. It was fascinating to me.
Yeah. I think polyphony did that for me when Palestrina and Thomas Tallis and such, just and again, for me, like church music, I mean, this is like the choirs of the holy singing, just
the hosts,
all the hosts singing. It was just like, whoa, that's probably my favorite, but
yeah, good stuff.
As Carl was saying, the church was the first to write anything down with regards to music. The early church is our music history, insofar as not that there was not other music being played, and there was probably a lot being played by ear and passed down that way, but we don't have record of that. Like you said, Carl, we're making guesses when we look at these instruments. That maybe we have drawings of how they're supposed to play, but we don't really know how they're supposed to be tuned, or what were the sounds coming out of those instruments. We might not even have the materials that they had at those times to form those instruments. So the church is our first touch with music history. That is as far as we can go on solid ground. And then from there, it's interesting because the first composers that we learn about in the music history class are composers that in some way or another work for the church. Of course, Bach was a well-known member of the Lutheran church. And then, Mozart wrote for the church at some point or another, as well as Haydn. And then slowly that starts to be less and less as time goes on, and the composers start to write for themselves or for what they want to write. But I do think that in that way, the church has played a huge role in our understanding of music, in that it gives us our starting point. And from there, we see things evolve and change and move away from just church music. But
Mhm.
it's interesting when I ask the students, what do you like to pray to music? Like, does prayer lift you higher towards God when you're in church? And some say yes and some say no. And then secondly, what kind of church music draws you closer in prayer? And some say Gregorian chant, some say hymns. Maybe I've had some Eastern Rite students and they have beautiful Byzantine songs that are sung in their church. And but it is because it is deeply intertwined with your relationship with God. It is this very special way that music speaks to you individually, and what kind of church music speaks to you individually. What maybe draws one person and may not draw the other, or maybe it has to do with how they were raised. This reminds me of growing up, and therefore I can enter in much more completely, or whatever it is. So it's very interesting hearing from them and hearing the diversity of tastes when it comes to what actually draws them closer in prayer when they are in church.
I would like to add, though, that not just church music, but other types of music can make you touch the divine. I mean, I can't think of anything in particular, but I know in my own experience, listening to certain maybe progressive recordings or jazz recordings, that I have sensed something of the beautiful, the beautiful. And I think back of some of my own experiences as a performer. I was raised in the Episcopal Church. I would have called it High Anglican. And when I was in high school, I would play the Easter service. And that was always, and then in high school, almost always before any rehearsal began, we would play Bach chorales for tuning purposes. And you'd sit there and you'd hold one of those Bach chords, and you could tell how rich it was. You could tell how rich it was, especially when we got it in tune. And man, that you felt that. You felt that. And I guess my connection to music, even though I have long since not been a performer, have long since sort of forgotten all my music theory that I didn't really understand anyway, is my connection is always in terms of what I see internally. For me, it's always this sort of inner vision of things. No matter what it is that I'm listening to, I can get on that transport and ride it, so to speak. I guess that's what draws me so much to it, and why I try in my little ways to encourage my students to listen beyond their limited horizon, because I got lucky and was able to discover a wide array of things when I, you know, worked in records for a long time, which was, even though it was retail capitalist work, it was rewarding
Mm-hmm.
educationally for me.
Yeah. It makes me think in our cohort this year, I was placed in the cohort where we have been talking about how to include art in our classes, and we have been reading the Letter to Artists by Pope John Paul II. And I'd read it a while ago, but wow, has it been so wonderful to read it again. And it made me think about what you're saying, Carl, because um, Pope John Paul really talks about how the vocation of all artists is to create something where we get just a sliver of the beauty with a capital B that hopefully we'll all see, in heaven, right? That God is. And so, um, and that, yeah, that is not just um, limited to religious art or religious music or whatever it might be. It definitely can be listening to all kinds of music or seeing all kinds of art or all kinds of architecture that, it, if it does give you that feeling of a minuscule glimpse to the divine, then it's functioning as it should. And he really brings that home of, let that be your motivation as artists. Do not let fame or popularity or uh, coloring outside the line, so to speak, be your goal. Let it be to, in your own way, with your own gifts, uh, bring bring beauty down here on earth in some way or another. And I thought that um, was really something that we could all use reminding of, and that is really true and kind of puts words to the experience that we often have and don't really understand why we're feeling so moved. Um, but it is because of that experience that we're having of seeing a small sliver of what we hope to one day attain.
That's it. Absolutely. Yes, the divine can manifest itself in innumerable ways. Innumerable ways. I'm always reminded by the idea of the word art, which comes from the Greek techne, which we always think of in terms of skills. Well, yeah, art is a skill, and it's a skill that points us to the beautiful in all its different ways. In all its different ways. So yeah, way cool.
Well, Olivia, I think this would be a good time to talk about the music theory course. It's being offered this upcoming school year, 26-27. What can folks look for there, and what's it like?
So the music theory class at Kolbe, we had our inaugural session last year, and we're bringing it back this fall, and it'll be offered every other fall, rotated with the music history course. So we use the text from Alfred's Essentials of Music Theory. Um, but as with the music history course, this class was before offered as just a take-home homeschool course, and so we had to kind of bring it to the online format. And so we start with the very basics of music theory, and you do some music reading, but very quickly we move into more complicated, more, um, I guess I would say, a deeper understanding of music theory, go a little bit deeper. And by the end of the course, students, know how to write chords, they understand the keys, they understand how to read in both bass and treble clef. And I was, nervous on offering the first class last year because, I had worked over the summer to get the syllabus ready for online, and I'd hoped I'd made the selections that I should, you never know till you start doing it. And there were definitely tweaks that I will be making, but um, I would say that I heard from about half the class after the class was over saying how much they had opened their eyes and given them a deeper appreciation of music as an art form. And that was really gratifying because music theory has a um a reputation for maybe being drier to some, but I think that for students to start to see and hear what they were learning and how, as we touched on earlier, what they were hearing made mathematical sense, that was a really cool experience for them. And so, yeah, we incorporate like, let's listen to something and then let's talk about why it makes sense, or why would you choose this chord progression, and how, so trying to incorporate, because since music is an auditory form of art, you can't just look at the pen and paper, you have to also hear it for it to come to life. And so trying to integrate both of those together has been fun. So yeah, it's been a great class. We're happy to have it. As it is such an important part, as we talked about, of um, a well-rounded education, I guess I would say. So it's time that Colby had this, and I'm really happy that the students can now take advantage of that.
Yeah. And it's a high school course,
It's a
right?
high school
Okay.
course, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's one of the sad things about education in general is that music is not a requirement. I mean, you go through elementary school and you learn how to hit two sticks together in rhythm, and that's about it.
hmm
And from elementary school forward, kids get no training at all in music
hmm
unless like people like me and Olivia say, I want to play an instrument
Yeah.
because I want to go on the band trips or whatever.
Right.
uh, but uh, it's a shame that it's not a requirement because for all the educational ease that tells you, well, a music education means your student will score higher on the tests and stuff. It's not just about that. It's about teaching you how to be human, which is why I guess in this country we don't really want to teach literature, history, philosophy, theology, any of these things anymore because we're not interested in teaching people how to be human. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but what do I know?
And I think one of the things my students would say, and I feel this way too, but I'm a music theory nerd, so I don't categorize myself as a normal person in that way. So, I know that I'm the outsider, and so I try to, play it cool. But they were all saying, all my students were like, this is so cool. Like it just actually is cool that it works out this way. And it like kind of blew their mind. And it was just, it's fun. It is fun. Now, not that, not, not that it's not hard and can be difficult to figure out, but when you do, you go, whoa, this is amazing that things work like this, that sounds work this way, that that our souls have been so created that certain sounds are pleasing to us and certain sounds are not, and that we can be moved so completely by just changing one note in a chord or a different progression.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of crazy. So you think about it, you're just listening to different sounds. And so I think for some of the students, and I hope and pray that this was their experience, that maybe this was like, okay, I'll fulfill my music fine arts elective. Here we go, and then they were like, oh no, this is actually really fun. This is making sense to me and making sense of an area of my life that I probably do interact with music in some way. And now all of a sudden I'm kind of getting to know it better.
Yeah, discovering God's creativity.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So music history alternates with music theory. So I'm wondering, it's because you've been teaching that one for several semesters now, Olivia. What is it? Are there things that kind of like me returning to the piano repertoire? It's almost like reading one of the great books again to go back to that repertoire. Um, I've been wanting to say that the whole time, so I finally got that in. But when you return to the music history course year after year, what is it? Are there certain things that you really look forward to getting to with the students, or are you finding new things each time you're going through it?
Yeah, I am definitely always finding new things and trying to tailor my teaching to be more clear and succinct, and there's just so much. The struggle with music history is that there's so much and I have to limit myself, because also then my students go, are we supposed to know all these eight composers that you just threw at us in the last hour? And I go, oh, no, 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 don't worry. This was just me getting carried away and getting really excited about this era. But um, one thing that's been interesting, because as you said, it's been a few years now, is depending on the group of students in that class, the taste of the different groups over the years has been very diverse. So, for instance, when we just dip our toe into the modern era at the very end of the semester, and I play a little Stravinsky for them. And the first year, they were like, "Turn this racket off! This is horrible. What is this? We hate." Like there was nobody there. No, Stravinsky had zero support. And um,
Wow.
this third year teaching it, I played it and I was kind of waiting. I was waiting for the reaction. And everybody was like, this is really cool. This is different. This is fun. And they mostly he had support. And I thought, oh, okay. So it's interesting seeing the reactions of the students to the different pieces that we're listening to and um, the different things they kind of latch onto in different semesters. You know, the different things that really, those classes that the conversation just gets taken away in one really fun direction or another. So that's been cool to see. And then, you know, you'll have a student who comes in with a certain, we had a ballet dancer in our last semester this past fall. And so she was great because she talked a lot about when we covered Tchaikovsky and some of the ballets, she really brought a unique perspective in that regard. So it's fun because you get these students that come in with experience in areas that I myself may not have experience in. So that's been really fun to see over the different years.
Oh, that would be fun. Yeah. Neat.
Interesting. I used when I was young and went to rock and roll concerts, there was a particular band that would, before they would come on stage, they would open up by playing the last portion of the Firebird,
Oh, yeah.
you know, and then boom, they would come on stage and, you know, rock the house. But and I played Stravinsky in high school. Just great stuff.
Yeah.
Just great stuff. Hard for me to believe they didn't like it. Well, not hard for me to believe, I guess.
They were
Good
like,
stuff, though.
put Bach back on. Get this off. This is what we have to listen to. I was like, well,
Oh,
he's an
man.
important figure. You do need to understand him. And even if you may not love him, that's okay. You don't have to.
You know, every time we have one of these, it's like, oh, we could do another couple of sessions about music. There's a lot more to be said, yeah, about this, but yeah, it's a good continuation, a good start, I think.
Yes, it's like a suite. We'll call this series a suite rather than like a symphony or something with a few movements. We'll make it a suite. How about that?
Sounds good.
Okay. Any final thoughts or takeaways though for this time?
I guess what I would say is if all speech is music, as Socrates would have us understand, then we should be more in tune to how we speak to one another, because music is an attunement. We have to be in tune.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to learn our tonality, and we need to learn how to harmonize our words and pay attention carefully to how we cadence things, how we articulate our patterns of speech, and be more attentive to all of that.
Mm-hmm.
That was a great cadenza. I like that.
I learned how to ad lib in jazz.
I like it.
Yeah, exactly.
But you knew all the rules, and so you knew however you could take that and then arrive back at the yeah.
Well, one thing that it's taking a little left turn, but Bonnie, you were bringing up how you've been revisiting some of your old pieces, and I've had that experience as well. I'm ashamed to say it because, you know, it's embarrassing, but when I was younger and I played Bach for the first time, I was like, okay, yeah, I mean, it's really pretty, but I couldn't sink my teeth into it the way I could sink into some of the romantic pieces I was playing at that time. And now, many, many, many years later, I feel like my brain is maybe ready for Bach. And so when I've replayed some of the pieces that before, once I got the notes and rhythm down, I was like, I don't really see why people pour their heart and soul into this guy.
Yeah.
And now going to the suites again, I find them one of the most enjoyable to play, and have found that I've just been able to connect with them so much more profoundly. And so that's the great thing about music, you know, and I say this to my students, it's a lifelong journey and it's a lifelong friend to have. And so it really is worth investing that time in cultivating your taste. If you're lucky enough to be able to play an instrument, to cultivate your craft, because it's it enriches our lives so much. And, you think of the world if music went away. Um, and, it would be a pretty void place. So I just think that that's, maybe a parting thought is, investing that time is never frivolous. It will stay with you and it will give you back tenfold what you put in.
Yep. That's interesting that you and I, both of us, were gravitating to the romantic art. Brahms was my guy. And now, like, I have some Scarlatti that I'm working back through, and the Haydn, like I mentioned, and yeah, so that's so interesting. Yes, Schubert also,
Yeah.
and he's not, of course, he's a little later, but anyway, very much in that same line. So that's so interesting how, yeah,
Yeah.
okay,
Maybe partly because as we get older, we learn to analyze things more carefully.
yeah,
Bach is a very analytical thinker. And when we're young, we like that lush sort of
right,
romanticism.
yes,
Yes.
Yeah. Um, Again, I go back to those Bach chords. And you just hold on to one of those Bach chords and you hear it all the way up and down and you go,
Yeah.
wow, that's jazz.
When my first would make us hold them, he would be like, "Isn't that yummy?" And we would all be like, "You're weird." Now I say that to my students, and they're like, "Okay, what? You
okay.
need to get out more."
Oh,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
it sounds like the ideal person to teach the course because your enthusiasm for it would be, draw them right in.
I was thinking back to during finals when I was at Thomas Aquinas College, they had a music listening room with records. And
Mhm.
so the Bach cello suites by Honor Bilsma was one of my go-tos. And then the other one was Francis Albert Sinatra and Antonio Carlos Jobim singing Bossa Nova.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
those
Oh,
were
yeah.
very different, but those were my,
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember those listening libraries.
Yeah. The listening lab.
I hung out in those too back in the day.
Same. Yeah.
Cool stuff. Cool stuff.
So we're going to have links to the Kolbe Cast episodes where these folks have been on before, and the Professor Carroll episode as well. And we'll have a link to how folks can check out more about the music theory course. So I guess this will be our cadence for now, and we will look forward to our next movements. Good visiting with you guys, Carl and Olivia. Thanks for coming back.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you both. Thank you.
Subscribe to the Kolbe Cast on your favorite podcast app so that you don't miss an episode. And let us know how we're doing by leaving a rating or a review. And as always, feel free to email us at podcast@kolbe.org.
Mary, our Mother, pray for us. St. Maximilian Kolbe, St. Ignatius of Loyola, holy saints and angels, pray for us. Ad maiorem Dei gloriam.